Hi, good afternoon, Louise again. I am going to just make this very quick video about the Individualised Service Agreement, who to complete it for, and then go through the process of where you find it, how you download it, how you complete it, what you should put in, and then upload it again. So Louise Dawson, currently the Head of Inclusion at Jumeirah College. I've put on there, what do I know? So I am a practicing head of inclusion, just the same as you. I know no more than you. I know no less than you. I am giving you some advice and guidance on my belief on how the Individualised Service Agreement works. But clearly you will have your own ideas and you'll have your own policies and procedures. So the next bullet point says, who has final say in your practice? The answer to that is the school. You have an inclusion support team around you. You should really defer to them. Work out with your policy and your procedures and your cohort what you want to do. I'm just going to share with you my information and my knowledge. Take or leave whatever you like. This is your practice, not mine. Okay, I am creating this video on 4th of May 2020. So as we know, information changes, information gets updated, and this is the information that I have as of today, but next month it may be a completely different story. So do make sure that you keep in touch with KHDA and the guidance that comes out from them. As per the last video, there were 4 documents that are vital prior to this video. So make sure that you are familiar with the Inclusive Education Policy Framework from 2017, the Implementation Guide, the Directives and Guidelines, and the Categorization. You need to be familiar with all 4 of those before you can even start to attempt the Individualised Service Agreement. The definition of SEND stands the same. You'll find this definition in this document, the revised categorization framework from 2019 to 2020. A SEND student can be categorized as such through the work of a specialist or knowledgeable school team, displaying all of the characteristics of a particular category of impairment, delay, or disorder as found in this guide. A student will be formally diagnosed or identified by a qualified licensed medical professional, meaning an ed psych, a doctor, speech and language, occupational therapy, as having a long-term difficulty, impairment, or disorder. So who do we need to create an individualised service agreement for? So what I've done is I created 5 hypothetical students, and then I asked for advice on whether or not to have an ISA for this student. So for student A, the inclusion team works with the student. He is not externally identified as having special needs. He does receive free LSA and inclusion support from the school budget. His parents are not charged any fees. Does this student need an ISA? And the answer I received was no. Student B, the inclusion team works with student B. He is externally identified as having special needs. He receives free LSA and inclusion support from the school budget. His parents are not charged fees. He does not need an ISA. Student C, we work with them. She is identified as having needs. She receives free LSA and inclusion support from the budget. He gets occupational therapy and speech and language outside at Kids First or other provider. The school do not charge any extra money. Kids First or other do charge extra money. Does she need an ISA? The answer is no. Student D. The inclusion team works with student D. Is externally identified. She has an LSA, but that LSA is employed directly by the parent. So the school have nothing to do with the visa, the work permit, the holiday pay, the sickness pay, the medical, nothing to do with the school. The LSA is paid directly by the parent. School do not charge additional fees. Does this child need an ISA? No, they don't. Student E, this is the time when the student does need an ISA. The inclusion team works with student E, is externally identified as having needs. He has an LSA, so just to clarify, that can be internally or externally identified as having special needs. Has an LSA that is employed by school. The LSA is paid by school. The parents are charged additional fees to cover the LSA. Do they need an ISA? Yes, they do. LSA and ISA. Okay, the next question was, what is the deadline for uploading the agreements? So KHDA are very aware of the climate that we're in right now. However, before you invoice a parent, the agreement needs to be typed up, the agreement needs to be in place, the agreement needs to be signed. The agreement can be signed by a parent and returned to you digitally. Alternatively, the KHDA will accept an email as proof that the parent is happy. They do completely understand that we might not have parents in the country and we are unable to sit opposite the parents. However, there can still be evidence from the parents via email that they agree with the agreement. And then that signature document, whether it's an email or not, needs to be uploaded onto the portal with the ISA. But you must not invoice a family unless the agreement is in place. So if you're planning to have an agreement in place for September, then the agreement needs to be online by September. What is the deadline for uploading the attached documents such as psych? These are all at school and we may not have access before September. So the idea is that you submit what you can at the present time. So if you're going to invoice September the 1st, you need to have the agreement loaded. On the form, there is an option for is this uploaded or not, and you are able to submit the form and mention that you are going to upload the other information after we're back in school. They do recognise that documentation is in school. They do recognise we might not have that in our workplace at the present time, but you can still upload and put that you're going to upload the rest of it later. Question 3 was, what happens if our parents are out of the country and unable to sign the document for September? They will accept consent by email. Question 4, how will the KHDA guaranteeing confidentiality for the uploaded documentation? Once the information is uploaded, it's highly unlikely that anybody will review it or anybody will go through it. But if a parent was to make a complaint or become upset with the practice that's in place at your school, then it will be scrutinised. So KHDA are saying that we are going to upload the information and it's going to sit on a portal until they need it. The concerned team only will have access, and the intention is to only look if there is a complaint. Who will have access to once that is uploaded? The KHDA have informed me that there is no other third party involved in this process and it will only be the KHDA. Should schools ensure that they have signed data protection release forms prior to uploading the documentation? The response I got was, as per school policy, there is no requirement from KHDA to have signed data protection release forms. Although any of you working with students in Europe, any of you working with exam access arrangements will know that we're not actually allowed to release information unless we have signed data protection release forms. So whilst this is not required by KHDA, it is as per your school policy. My personal advice would be do not release psychs or any other personal data to the KHDA above and beyond regular school information. So clearly date of birth, name, etc. But in terms of releasing an educational psychology report or a medical report, which can be very, very sensitive, you should make sure that you at least have that conversation and an email to protect yourself before forwarding that outside your school, just like we do with the exam access arrangements. Question 7, which category of need would apply to a child with Down syndrome or other unlisted? On the form, you can tick the others box, but you must identify the student's needs. So when you go back to the revised category, let me just show you what I mean. When you go back to the revised category of barriers, you will see that it's broken down into the 4, the cognition and learning, communication, interaction, social and physical. If you have a child with a syndrome that isn't listed, you must identify what their biggest barrier is. So if child A has a serious communication disorder, then you would put them into section 5. If they have a physical disability on top, then I would probably list them as number 11. If there is cognitive delay, I would probably put them into intellectual disability, depending on that specific child and their specific needs. So 3 children with Down syndrome can come into this in 3 different categories and 3 different areas, and that is completely acceptable. So depending on how well you know the child and how well you know the barriers, list them as others, but you can list them as section 1 if they meet these criteria. Okay, I hope that makes sense. You can tick others, but must identify the student's needs, speech, etc. Syndromes should be specified by the barrier as per sections of the recategorization document. Question 8. In terms of learning difficulty, where is the definition of terms mild, moderate, and severe? The response I got back was that they are all here in the recategorization. So here we have mild, here we have moderate, and here we have severe. And you will find there is a list of barriers, and your child will need to meet that list of barriers, or at least a proportion of that list of barriers, in order to meet the criteria for severe. And I think that the next question is about the same with autism. Mild, moderate, severe. Are we all referring to the DSM? The DSM now says level 1, level 2, level 3. And again, if you follow this down into the autism section, communication, interaction, speech, autism, you will see here that mild comes as level 1, and these are the barriers. Moderate comes as level 2, and these are the barriers. And extremely complex barriers, level 3, would be identified here. How recent do EdPsych reports need to be? So the answer I got back from the KHDA was 2 years, but I do think that this is dependent on your student. If you've had the same student from year 4 to year 6, and that EdPsych was done with you in year 4 and then moving up to your feeder secondary year 7, I do think it's acceptable for that educational psychology report to still be valid across 3-4 years. If they're in the same setting, and if you know the child well and you know the barriers. If the barriers become more complex as they get older and you need to have a review, then I would definitely go back and have a review. But I wouldn't review an EdPsych for a student so within the British curriculum, we have the exams from year 10. We need our children to be reviewed for need at least year 9, middle of year 9, going into year 10. So if the EdPsych was done in year 5, I wouldn't have it done again in year 8 because I need to have it done again in year 9. So depends on your child, depends on your setting, and depends where the EdPsych was completed. Again, if you've got a student coming from out of the city, out of the country, and they're in year 8 and the EdPsych hasn't been done since year 2, in another country, in another language, then I would consider, if the child still presents with barriers and you still need support, I would then consider having it redone. New students within 2 years, existing students where the EP is no longer fit for purpose. Can you use EdPsychs from overseas? The pure answer is no. So if the child is just arriving and they have the EdPsych, then I would use that to help determine what support they might need in school. But generally, the KHDA would not accept an EdPsych from overseas. Again, if they're in year 8, I wouldn't get them EdPsyched if they need to be done for year 9 for exam access arrangements. Use your professional judgment on this. What's the requirement from KHDA for an EdPsych? Do the EdPsychs have to be certified by the KHDA, Ministry of Health, or the CDA? So EdPsychs generally need to be known by the school or the leader of provision. So if you're new to the country, you might not know the EdPsychs here, but use one which has a good reputation and speak to those around you so that we use good EdPsychs. They need to be qualified and they need to be certified, and they need to be registered with the CDA. Not with a KHDA. So you will find, and it is perfectly acceptable to ask educational psychologists for a copy of their certificate and to make sure that they are following the requirements of this country in order to practice. And if you are doing exam access arrangements for the UK, make sure that they have the required knowledge and skills, experience and qualifications to meet the criteria of JCQ. Can we delete an ISA once it is submitted? I'm going to show you the portal now, but basically the answer is no. Once it's submitted, it's submitted. The KHDA are more than aware that an ISA may change once, twice, 3 times a year. if there is an increase in provision or a decrease in provision, just create the form again, get it re-signed, and then add it up with the old one. The KHDA said that they are very interested to see the student's journey, especially over multiple years in multiple schools. So where can we find the ISA template? So when you go to the KHDA portal, this is the portal that generally is only, prior to this year, we probably wouldn't have had access to it as heads of inclusion, but this year we do. So the link is here, which you can review, and I got my password from my Arabic secretary, the one that supports and deals with the KHDA. When you are able to log in, you go over here on the left-hand side, you go to new services, which you can hardly see because, okay, so go to new services. You'll then get these menus come up, and one of the services here is administration. On administration, you scroll down here to individualized service agreements, and this is the part of the portal that you need. You should be familiar with this because there's also the students for determination data, which we've all had to fill in this year. I clicked on that by mistake. Why is that? Okay, so for now, I'm going to the individualized service agreement. Take off here. So over here, you will see a blue link where you can download the template in English, or you can download the template in Arabic, depending on which version you would like. You click on the link and it downloads. Once it's downloaded, it looks like this. It's on. So I've obviously downloaded the English because I probably wouldn't be able to be much help in Arabic. Once you've downloaded it, I think the first thing that I would do is create a template for your school. Otherwise, you're going to be typing repeated information into the same boxes, and that would be very laborious. So you can enter your name of your school and your principal, your email address and your phone number, your name and your position. That can all be created and then saved off as a template. You're not going to have the second party details. When it comes to completing it, name of student, your father's contact, mother's contact, all fairly standard information. Name of the student, student's ID number. Again, due to the remote learning, we might not have this number at the present time. So I would write in there to be completed later, and then complete it when you get back into school. The year and grade of enrollment is standard. This is where you type in the student's main category of need. And you'll notice if you scroll over, this has actually got a pull down menu, which ties back directly to the revised categorization document. So you do need to ensure that you have your needs already identified to make that bit easier for you. And you'll notice that I did have to scroll over because when it's here, you can't see the pull down menu. Does the child have a formal diagnosis? Has the student been enrolled previously in the same school? Did the student have a previous agreement? Does the student have a sibling with an agreement? Again, I would still go through this first and complete what you can for a template for your school. Here is where you need to justify why you're putting in this agreement for the student. So they've given you 3 options, but then you must complete your other if the answer is yes. So if you type yes here, justification in here, no here, then there's no justification. Yes, then you need justification. If there is another purpose for this, then you need to type yes and put in the justification. Evidence used for the individualized service justification. Students' medical and educational assessment reports. So these are going to be available. You have got them. So right now in this climate, you might have, is it available? Yes. You can type in here, not yet, or no. Some parents are going to say, I don't want you to upload the information. So you can put here no, but you must make sure that it's available in school. So this is your checklist of what you must have in your student file back at school when we get there in September. If you don't have this information at all, full stop, then I would be reluctant to put in a ISA at this time. Okay, you must have evidence and justification for why you're doing this. In this section here, the school standard services. So you'll remember in video 1, I talked about the school standard service. This is what the school is going to include in its regular fees. And you need to be able to say yes or no, whether or not. So in school, formal and informal assessments, identification of educational needs. So have you got that? Yes or no? And again, a lot of this is your standard support. So this would go in your original template the first time, so you don't have to repeat yourself. Additional support from learning support assistants within learning environments, training the student on the use of assistive technology, access to vocational training, in-school support, etc. So that's just a simple yes or no. This bit becomes tricky because you're going to type in here all of the information for your particular student. So the service name here might be LSA support, might be speech and language, might be OT, might be one-to-one session. Service name. Service description, fairly straightforward. Provision frequency. So this is once a week, 3 times a week, 3 hours a week, 6 hours a week. The duration. So this might be, the first report might be from September to December. The provider might be your school. It might be an external provider. Success criteria. So for here, we don't have a lot of space and we are probably tempted to type paragraphs. So here I would just write something like meet the IEP goals or IEP criteria. Planned number of service review meetings. How many times are you going to review this each year to make sure that you're still providing the right service? So here would be once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year. Advisable if you're charging parents that you're meeting them 3 times a year at a minimum. Person from the school overseeing the individualized service. So that might be your head of inclusion. It might be a senior leader. It might be a teacher who is managing a group of LSAs. Position of the person overseeing the provision. So that's from the school. So this is if there's an external provider. So if I was typing here a therapy centre, the person from the therapy centre might be named here. This is the actual cost. This is to ensure that we are not making a profit from the students. Payment source is probably going to be parents, but sometimes we do have companies or insurance paying. And then the payment schedule. So is that monthly for 3 months? Is that termly? Is that annual? When are we going to be scheduling the payments? This part is who is responsible for what. So this tells us exactly what the school is responsible for, and this tells us what the parent is responsible for. And then you've just simply got your signatures here. Quite simple, but a little bit time consuming. Once you've completed that and you've saved it, I would, that's where to find it. I would follow this procedure for completion. I would identify the student, ensure that you're able to note everything. Take that home. Create your school template and then save it. Complete the details after a discussion with the parents. So I would make sure that the parents are in agreement before you start on this process. I would then have a copy sent over to your parents and get them to approve it, because what you don't want to be doing is getting 3 or 4 versions of the same report signed by your principal before you send it out. So get the parents to approve it, then send it to your principal for signature, and then send it over to your parents. Some parents will sign it without the principal's signature and some won't. If the parent signs it first and then the principal, make sure the parent has a copy of the final one with both signatures, and make sure that on your file you have the file with the principal and the parents, and then you upload it to the portal. When you go back to the portal, the very, very first thing you must do is that this is now defaulting to September. But your student, if you're preparing these now, your student won't be listed in 2021. So you'll need to go back to 2019-20. You'll need to pick out your curriculum and you'll need to pick out the grade of your students. And then this pull down menu will automatically populate. I'm not going to click on it because it does show then all of my students and I don't wish to do that. So you click on here, find the student, and then you click add student and you upload your Excel file. And it's as simple as that. And you will have completed your ISAs. Well done. Thank you very much for listening. And if you've got any questions, do not hesitate to drop me a line. I've put on here a copy of a link to all of the frameworks and inclusive guides and guidelines and the portal address here. And if you wish to contact me, you may do so on this email here. I hope that you found it useful, and now I will stop talking.